Welcome everybody to this webinar on Housing First, sharing the lessons from the national evaluations. My name's Liz Zacharias. I'm going to be chairing the session today. There's been a lot of interest in Housing First and the pilots. And as I said, we've had about almost 200 people sign up for this. So we're really pleased to be able to share some of the learning from those. The webinar has been jointly organised with the National Housing Consortium. So I'm just going to hand you over to Satty Rai, who's the Members Engagement Manager, to sort of say a few words about the National Housing Consortium and their interest in Housing First. So Satty, over to you.
Thanks, Liz. Good morning, everybody. As you've just heard, my name is Satty Rai and I'm Member Engagement Manager for the Northern Housing Consortium. And thank you very much for joining this morning. It's great to see so many of you on the call. I think it just really highlights how timely this topic is and the importance of Housing First in its prevention sort of approach to homelessness. In terms of Housing First, we've covered this across our member engagement activity on a number of occasions through our annual event. We host an annual event on homelessness and our Northern Homelessness Network. So just to say, in terms of the Northern Housing Consortium, we are a membership body for the social housing organisations. That includes housing associations and local authorities. And in the main, we work across the three northern regions, North East, North West and Yorkshire and Humber. And it's great to see so many of our members on the call today. We're delighted to be partnered up with Campbell Kell for this session. Campbell Kell is a sponsor partner of Northern Housing Consortium, have been for about 5 years now. And as a supporter, they help us broaden the range of events that we can bring to our members across the social housing sector, which has included health and homelessness. And we've worked together on various different events, roundtables and networks right across those sort of areas and beyond. And we look forward to working further with them going forward. So I really hope that you find the session valuable today and give you some insightful takeaways to take back to your own organisations. And thank you once again for joining. And I'll pass you back over to Liz.
Okay, thanks, Satty. I'm just going to go through a few housekeeping issues. So we've got the chat is off, but we do have the Q&A on, and you're able to put questions into the Q&A and then upvote them. And at the end, there'll be some time for us to hopefully try and answer some of those. Where we can't answer questions, we might come back to them if we're able to after the session. In terms of the Q&As, as well as the representatives of each of the Housing First pilots, we've got Lila Baker, Mark Goldup and Helen Lewis, who were part of the Campbell Tickell team that did the local evaluations for the West Midlands Combined Authority and for the Liverpool City Region. The other couple of things to say is that there will be a break halfway through, a 5-minute break. And during that time, we've got a really interesting video from Liverpool City Region with workers talking about what Housing First has meant for their practice. And throughout the session, we've got some videos of people with lived experience. So that's it in terms of housekeeping. If we could move on to the sort of first slide with the agenda for the workshop. Basically, what we're aiming to do is I'll start off by giving a brief explanation of Housing First, the national pilot, the evaluations, and then there'll be a presentation from the West Midlands Combined Authority, the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and then the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority pilots. Each of them is going to talk about how they've structured their Housing First pilot, because each one has done it slightly differently. And then they're also going to talk about some of the areas that they've dealt with. And then at the end of those presentations, we're going to have a brief summary of lessons learned and then try and address some of the Q&As. So next slide, please. I'll just give you a kind of brief background. For those of you who may not be aware, Housing First is a model of, it's a housing-led model that's based on having a stable home and wraparound open-ended support without any conditionality. What that means is that people, no matter how complex their issues are giving the stability of a tenancy or stability of their own home, and then the support is wrapped around them to help them to deal with some of those issues. Whereas in traditional supported housing services, there was an idea that people step down from one type of maybe intense support into other forms of less support as they developed. Housing First was originally started in the US, and there's a significant body of evidence that says how well it works with clients that are traditionally may be seen as chaotic or having kind of complex needs. And it's also developed an evidence base in Finland. And that's why politicians have been really interested in it. There was an initial feasibility study that was done in the Liverpool City Region, and then the government, as part of their commitment to reducing homelessness and rough sleeping, wanted to look at some pilots to test the efficacy of Housing First within the UK context. So there's the 3 national pilots. They've been running since 2018-19, and they're due to finish in 2024. There is a national evaluation that was also commissioned at the same time, and that the kind of full final reporting on that is going to be completed in 2024 as well. But in the meantime, they've been producing interim reports, and I've given the link there for where you can find all of those interim reports. And Homeless Link have also carried out a report on the Housing First model and the fidelity of each of the Housing First services to the model. I should say, I think somebody's asked a question about the slides, and we are going to be sharing all the slides and the videos and actually all the evaluation reports after the session this morning with everyone. If we could move on to the next slide, please. In terms of the local evaluation, the Greater Manchester Combined Authority carried out an evaluation of the Greater Manchester pilot, and then Campbell to Kell were commissioned firstly by the West Midlands Combined Authority and then the Liverpool City Region to carry out a local evaluation of each of those. And we used the same team to do that. So the team was myself, Mark Goldup, Helen Lewis and Lila Baker, which was really interesting because we were able to kind of share some of the insights from the first evaluation with the second. So across all the pilots, the main sort of objectives and the key areas of focus for the evaluations were around understanding the performance and what's working or not working in terms of how the pilot's being designed and how it's being delivered. There's also a need to understand the profile of clients and their journeys, the likelihood of graduations from Housing First, which is the term really used for people who no longer need Housing First and then go on to kind of mainstream support or floating support or no support in some cases. Also to look at the impact of trauma-informed approaches on those outcomes for individuals, what ways of working are effective and not effective. And then there was a whole area around multi-agency working, how to influence and engage other parts of the system. For example, social housing providers, mental health, adult social care. There's been some work done on value for money, and we understand the national evaluation is also tasked with doing some work on that. And the Liverpool City Region colleagues particularly will be able to sort of share some of the work they did on value for money in terms of Housing First. And then the other 2 areas, which hopefully we'll get to discuss as part of the Q&As as well, is really the whole issue around how far can Housing First create a culture change and wider systems change? You know, and whether really it is a housing-led solution or whether it's a kind of multi-agency solution. And then the other issue to discuss is really how can we scale up and widen the implementation of Housing First. So those were the key sort of areas that all three evaluations looked at in varying degrees. As I said, we're going to be having presentations from each of the Housing First pilots. And I'd like to hand you over now to Channa Payne-Williams, who is the commissioning officer for the Birmingham City Council. And Birmingham City Council are the lead council for the Housing First service in the West Midlands. So I'll hand you over to Channa. Thanks.
Thanks, Liz. Good morning, everyone. As Liz says, I manage the Housing First of the West Midlands across 7 regions. So I'll just go into the next slides, please. So West Midlands, we have a divulge service delivery across the 7 participating local authorities. So that is Coventry, Birmingham, Dudley, Walsall, Wolverhampton, and Solihull and Sandwell. I think I got all 7 there. So as I said, we have 7 local authority, and the divulge model is designed. We decided that it's best for each local authority to mold their Housing First based on their clients and their environment. So each local authority will take responsibility for commissioning their Housing First services based on their locality needs and inequality based on that area. So I said Birmingham City Council is a council body on behalf of the West Midlands. And we definitely put a preventive approach embedded in with local services and specific crisis support. I think that we think that was very crucial to have there in our service delivery, very effective in supporting these complex individuals. And we have step down services and a legacy planning. So as part of each local authority support and delivery model, we have these interventions and support of our individuals embedded in our service and what needs to be happening. And we have one dedicated central project management and oversight function across 7 localities. So it's different barriers of level of support and management involved in place for each, because you can imagine we have 7 local authorities have been doing this. And initially, this is a 3-year pilot, but we ensure to add in an extra 2 years of support delivery within our model as well. And that's proven to be very beneficial. Delivering it, because along the way we found out that the clients do need more support than already perceived. That was perceived that wouldn't be that much support clients, but it is. So it was very fortunate we actually had those extra 2 years of service delivery within our model. And we have centrally commissioned a PI support for strength base and support for staff. And that's been very, very, very beneficial as well for all 7 local authority to actually support the staff and their journey and supporting these very complex individuals. And this is feedback from staff and from local how benefits it is for staff and clients. And we have our evaluation, as Liz said in the beginning of our introduction. We have embedded also research evaluation of the project. So that's the ICF, that's Campbell, that's West Midlands, and other independent evaluations as well. And we are also currently involved in other research on the health impact of Housing First for individuals. So this is an overview of what different our service delivery for Housing First has been. Next slide. So a little bit about the support journey for our clients. We currently have 406 clients being supported on the program and housed. And 7 individuals in other areas, the hospital or in prison, or other support services, because if the individual require additional support before getting to housing, we do support it as well. If the individual want to go to complex needs or somewhere else to get them ready to be able to go in the house, we do support that. And we got 20 individuals waiting to be housed and rehoused as well. And currently we have 66 graduation across the 7 authority. So this is a journey. We have also housed and supported and over 522 individuals throughout the program. This is just an overview of how much individuals have come through our services and how much support we provided and where we are at in our housing and how much individuals have graduated. Next question, next slide. It's a little bit about the support needs and circumstances that we have actually seen across supporting these individuals for the period we have. And it's about what are their support needs. So we have 92% of the individuals that we have supported have substance misuse, 81% have mental health, 73% have offensive history, and 22% have physical disabilities. I can see here we have seen a great need of dual diagnosis. So people who have severe mental health and drug problems, and there was a great need to find a pathway to support these individuals. And we're in Birmingham, we're actually in the process of carving out that pathway and reducing that gap, and having a joint approach to supporting these individuals with dual diagnosis. So to support their needs better and their mental health needs. So it's quite an really various complex needs that these clients need support in. And based on the gender, because we do collect gender profile as well for in our housing first, and we've seen that there's 74% that are male, 74% that are female, and 26 supports that are male. And this is kind of a data hard point because Housing First gender profile has a higher percentage of females than overall national and West Midlands average of 18%. So we think it's good to highlight some of these findings on the support needs because we have a lot of females that we supported across the program as well. Next slide. And this is one to show the impact it has had on rough sleeping count. So in previous years, we have a triple digits. We have been 2 digits across the region for a couple of years. But with Housing First pilot being in place, it has helped reducing rough sleeping across the region. So we in 2022, we have a double digit rough sleeping. So we just show kind of the adverse impact that the Housing First has had on other areas of within rough sleeping and homelessness. And again, this is slide just to show you the percentages of the gender and the age and individual nationality of those individuals that are rough sleeping. And these data have been very useful to help in other interventions and support for rough sleeping individuals that we have across Birmingham. It's good to have these details intel to actually lesson learned and how to impact on other areas that support individuals. Because we are about prevention now in Housing First, we move towards a prevention approach and how we can take these data to actually help to mold those implementations in across the region. Other slide. So this is our partnership work, and we have really good partnership work across the Birmingham. Some of our partners there. So I said before, we have 7 local authorities. So we have a few different providers that provide the support for the clients on the ground. So we have Cranston, Trident, Citizens, Accord, Brighter Futures, and Shelter. We work with St. Basil's, the Job Centre. All these individuals are involved in our wraparound support for our clients. And having these good working relationship with these individuals does enhance our service delivery for our clients. Is that delivering the partnership in addition to commission support. Example, we have a multiple disciplinary team that has housing, health, social care, the police, community workers, substance misuse individuals, as well as providers, NHS staff, The job center has been very crucial in helping our support as well. And we have all these individuals around for clients, for those individuals that are even more complex than perceived, that needs more additional help and support, to find out what is the best solution for that individual to get the best outcome for them. So we have those multiple disciplinary meetings on a regular basis when it's needed for specific clients. And we have all that wraparound support individuals in place to help that. And that's help our program matrix and our KPI development as well, and monitoring. So, and it took a while to get those partnership work. We have those key conversations and involvement, and everyone understand what the aim of Housing First is, what we're trying to do for these individuals, and the different approach we're trying to have. And having this partnership working and having this understanding within Birmingham, the partnership work is crucial. It was very beneficial to having the wraparound support, having the housing situation being involved. It was difficult with the housing, different housing association, as in, not private rent accommodation. But once we actually had those challenging conversations, and once we understood what does good look like for you, what are your concerns, we kind of had that really good joint up collaborative work that we needed to support these individuals. Next slide, please. So these are some of the things that we have pointed out, predicted future needs for Housing First. So in Birmingham, we currently, in the West Midlands, we currently secured further funding, because what we also realized that these individuals require more support. Depends on their individual complex need, they require more support on Housing First. So we secured additional funding to support the clients currently we have on our scene for longer, and additional clients in that need support. Review the matrix and the KPIs and the wider data analysts across West Midlands and local authorities. And I think this is what I think we need to review. What I said before, we need to review the data that we've collected, trying to see how we can best support the individuals more effectively. And we identified bespoke pathways for dual diagnosis, as I said before, and mental health and misuse. And again, it's about service delivery, how we can best support and work together with other agencies to support these individuals. So I think now that we've done, identified the gaps, we now know what the additional support and needs we need to move forward. Homelessness task and finish group and fidelity assurance toolkits. Part of Homelessness Link, a national stream. We definitely think that we need to have these task and finish group and assessment toolkits to better support individuals. I think that would be crucial as well. And Homelessness Link has really been supportive as well along the way. So I think this would be something that would definitely provide additional support for this individual. These are just the key things. Other things that we can talk about within our panel, but I think these are the key things that we think would definitely be future needs needed to provide a more robust service. Next slide. So now I can give you my purview from where I am, but I think the best individuals to give you that update will be the clients themselves. So I have 2 videos there with some clients giving their journey for Housing First and how that's been for them. Hopefully it will play.
I was a rough sleeper for many years. I never had the want or wish to engage with any services. Since being with Housing First, I now have a worker who's amazing and goes above and beyond to help. They have opened a whole new world to me, to services that I didn't even know existed. I have managed to get contact with my daughter, which I never thought would be possible. Going forward, I wish to build on my skills, what I have managed to get from Housing First, and hopefully build towards a better future. I would like to thank Housing First for all the help and the support they have given me, because without them, I don't know where I'd be.
Hi, I'm Becky, and Housing First client, and I've been for a number of years. I came across Housing First when I was sleeping rough in Birmingham city centre due to my active addiction. And I would like to say, due to Housing First, I am now nearly 5 years clean and absent from all drugs. And I also have been put into a 2-bedroom property. It is such a difference. They are always there for whenever you need their support. Don't ever feel like you're alone because your worker will talk you through anything. I would also like to say I have 2 children in my care due to Housing First worker and always being my support. I can't see any changes I'd like to say because they've never done me a wrong. Everything is positive from my views. I take it there would be, but not on my part. They couldn't do any better for me. They're always there when you have a wobble, they're there to talk to you. The doors are never shut. You're welcome with open arms, and they try and encourage you to beat all your targets. Now I'm in clean, I'm looking to work with deaf children, and my worker is helping me along them lines. I still suffer with mental health, but the issues are minor compared to they used to be, and they give you techniques to work through them. All I'd like to say is thank you, Housing First, for changing my life for the better. Wouldn't be here without you. Thank you.
Thank you. That always gonna get to me kind of teary when I watch that last one. But thank you everyone for that. I'm happy to have questions at the regarding anything at the panel. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Channa. That's great and good to see that sort of testimony, if you like, from a couple of your clients. And one of the things that I think is really important about First is that Housing First is about the fidelity to the model and the low staff to tenant ratios, where I think it's between 1 worker to 5 service users, up to sort of 1 to 7. And that low ratio means that people have got the time to actually work with individuals. I think the other issues that we picked up in terms of the West Midlands pilot are actually the sort of persistence of staff, and particularly in terms of engaging people before they actually got into a tenancy. Because with all the Housing First pilots, people are kind of, if you like, taken onto the pilot, but then there's sometimes a bit of a lag in terms of finding the appropriate housing for them. And the persistence in maintaining contact and using that time to sort of build that relationship with the client once they did get housed, really put that relationship in good stead to sort of continue and have a positive impact. I think the other thing just to draw attention to in terms of housing providers and access to housing is that in the West Midlands, you set up a service level agreement with RPs, and that took some time to kind of embed and get underway. But also what was interesting in terms of the evaluation was the different social housing context in each of the local authorities. And I'm sure that goes across all of the pilots. So some local authorities don't have any social housing because it may be with an arm's length organisation, or it might have been transferred to housing associations. So, and then just the profile of that local authority and how much social housing it has, how much private rented sector accommodation it has, and what the profile of that private rented sector accommodation is and who their markets are. I think have been really key in terms of an impact on Housing First. But all 3 pilots have really worked well to sort of try and get as many housing units available for Housing First clients within the pilot period. And that has been challenging, but it's also, all of the pilots have done some really good work on that. Okay, so that's the experience of the West Midlands Combined Authority. And I'd now like to hand you over to Emily Cole, who is the lead for Housing First in the Greater Manchester Combined Authority area, and working with Lisa on the presentation, working with Emily on the presentation today, we have a lady called Lisa, who is a Housing First client within the Greater Manchester Housing First pilot, and she'll be talking to us about some of her experience after Emily's finished. So I'll hand over to you, Emily.
Thanks, Liz. Can I have the first slide, please? Thank you. So as Liz said, I'm Emily. I'm the programme lead for the Greater Manchester Housing First Partnership, and I actually work for Great Places. We're a registered social landlord and who are the lead partner for the GM programme. So we go on to the next slide, please. So we all know that obviously Housing First is part of the National Government Manifesto, but there's also really strong regional commitment and support in terms of Andy Burnham's, our Mayor's own manifesto for ending rough sleeping. And so Housing First forms a really important part of the regional wide responses to ending rough sleeping. With the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, when they were looking to obviously set up Housing First, they really wanted that GM-wide equitable coverage with many partners involved, but to have only kind of one lead partner. So that obviously really influenced our partnership development and kind of response to that. So if I can get the next slide, please. When we were looking to set up our partnership, we had some real key principles that we really thought were really important in terms of how we wanted to work together as a partnership, but also to continue to evolve and develop the programme. So the first one was that obviously co-produce. That's with people with lived experience at the heart of obviously the design from the outset, but then also the ongoing delivery. And also we garnered the views of many different sectors as we were looking to set up our partnership in terms of what they wanted from this regional Housing First pilot. It was really important to us that the service was equitable. So that's not only treating people on the programme as equal citizens, but also we have a standardised job description for frontline roles and also a rate card to ensure kind of standardised pay across all delivery partners, because we felt if you're obviously doing the same work, that should be reflected in terms of obviously pay. It was really important to us from the outset that our partnership was cross-sectoral, so it involves health, housing, people with lived experience in the CVS sector. And we really wanted to ensure that we delivered a high fidelity Housing First service. So high fidelity just means that the service is really aligned to those 7 key principles of a Housing First model. So we've put a lot of resource and focus around that. And we also really wanted to build capacity locally. So in the second year of our delivery, we brought in new local CVS delivery partners. And also we look to build capacity locally in terms of training and obviously information sharing around best practice. In terms of Great Places, as I mentioned, we are the lead provider. So we hold the head contract with the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and then we subcontract all of the other delivery partners and are responsible for obviously ensuring performance, ensuring consistency in delivery, ensuring that high fidelity service is obviously maintained across the region. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. This is our partnership. So we are a partnership of 12 different organisations all working together to deliver Housing First across the region. You'll notice that there's about 5 housing providers that are also part of support delivery in our partnership. And it was really important for us when we started out, obviously, these pilots. We didn't know what we were going to find or see. It was all obviously very much test and learn. So we wanted to keep space in our partnership to be able to evolve to, I guess, emerging needs and what we were seeing. So in the second year of our delivery, we carried out some responsive commissioning, where we work with the local authorities to understand kind of any unmet needs in their localities, and then brought in specialist local delivery partners from the CVS to meet that need. So that was specialisms in working with women and women who street work, with working with young people, with working with people with an offending history, and working with people with complex behavioural issues. So that's really strengthened and broadened our offer as a collective partnership. So we can go to the next slide, please. So in terms of Greater Manchester is made up of 10 local authority regions. And for this programme, it was zoned out into delivery areas. And for each delivery area, we have a lead partner that provides a zone lead who are responsible for that kind of senior operational oversight of delivery on the ground. no worker has more than 7 obviously cases of people they're supporting, and no team leader obviously manages more than 8 staff. And we really ensure consistency in terms of recruitment. We have partnership policy and procedures, obviously in terms of shared training and shared best practice sessions, and also in terms of our own governance structure. And also in the delivery areas, we have a matrix management framework. So we actually have staff from different organisations working together in the same teams to deliver housing first in each locality, and each staff is locally based and obviously works really closely with the local authorities and the local providers in that area. So then go to the next slide, please. You may have noticed that Greater Manchester Mental Health were part of obviously our partnership diagram that I've just shown, and that is because they are a core partner. We knew from delivery experience that the people we'll be working with on Housing First were highly likely to have co-occurring conditions, that's both mental health and drug and alcohol issues, which then actually makes it extremely difficult for people to access kind of the health interventions that they need. So from the outset, we commissioned Greater Manchester Mental Health Trust to provide a service that had 2 key elements. So that's around direct clinical delivery and also around training and capacity building of staff. So what that looks like on the ground is that we have 4 dual diagnosis practitioners that are each embedded in those delivery zones, working directly with obviously frontline staff, and that's providing direct clinical intervention obviously to people on the programme, and also training for staff at a kind of local level in terms of how best to support people with a dual diagnosis. We also have a clinical psychologist who performs reflective case supervision for all of the staff and also supports with complex formulations when required. And then we also have psychiatrists who support with diagnostic assessment and onward referrals and prescribing, but that's been really beneficial in accessing obviously that kind of mainstream health offer. Because the whole point of this service was not to replace statutory provision, but it was to provide that assertive outreach and flexibility and support and approach in terms of to engage people, to transition them into the mainstream kind of health offer. Because as we know, the people that we are supporting on Housing First really struggle to access kind of the global health offer due to the rigidity and inflexibility of how that is delivered. So that's why we have built in this kind of transition service as part of our partnership. So if I could get to the next slide, please. Obviously couldn't talk about Housing First without talking a little bit about kind of our accommodation strategy. So in Greater Manchester, as I'm sure many of you will know, because some of you are the housing providers I'm going to be talking about, we have the Greater Manchester Housing Providers Partnership, which are a collective of over 30 registered providers that are operating across the region and that have been working collaboratively and kind of in partnership for years, delivering kind of employment and skills contracts and also homelessness contracts. And obviously, as part of our partnership, the housing providers that I mentioned before are also part of the Greater Manchester Housing Providers Partnership. So there's kind of real partnership work and real synergy there. And the Greater Manchester Housing Provider Partnership supported us with allocating properties, pledges, like commitments of properties that they would provide to people on the programme over our years of delivery. And that would be via direct let allocations and real flexible working. And there's been a lot of work that we've done and with training with like Housing First workers and housing officers to really understand like roles and responsibilities, expectations of each, how we can work collaboratively together to ensure that those tenancies are sustained. And to date, we've had over 468 property offers, which really, I guess, demonstrates that kind of collective commitment to Housing First in the region. Can I get the next slide, please? So in terms of our regional evaluation, something that was really picked out as being really beneficial and that could be replicated across different, obviously, homelessness programmes was that of co-production, which means the involvement of people with lived experience. So in the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, they had already set up a co-production panel. So that's a panel of people with lived experience that's led by an organisation, Creative Inclusion. And they were involved from the outset because they were involved in moderating and scoring the tenders for when the regional programme first came out. And they've been involved in the ongoing design and delivery of our programme, as that lovely flower partnership diagram shows. Co-production is at the centre of everything that we do. So if I go to the next slide, please, just a few examples of, I guess, what we've done, obviously, around co-production. So in terms of our quality and assurance framework, an element of that is around guided conversations. So we developed a framework with Manchester Met University that we could use to understand from people on the programme if a high fidelity housing first service was being delivered, because there's no point if we think we're providing a high fidelity housing first service, but it's not landing that way. So we've developed these guided conversations that are performed by people with lived experience with people currently on the programme to gather information as part of our quality and assurance framework that is then used, obviously, in terms of ongoing service design, improvement, delivery, because obviously we review all of this every quarter with our delivery partners. They were also involved in the development of our outcomes framework, which kind of steered us away from using more kind of formalised, rigid outcome tools and looking more at what we can do in terms of kind of, that quantitative approach, but also, understanding people's journeys and individual journeys. We have people with lived experience on our own partnership board, but also on the regional homelessness board, obviously, who are involved in those strategic discussions and decision making. In terms of recruitment, we originally had people with lived experience on our recruitment panels with staff. But we kind of felt that wasn't enough. We recognise and acknowledge that people with lived experience are experts in identifying people that are going to be able to build strong relationships and trusting relationships with, obviously, people on the programme who've experienced complex trauma. So for our second big recruitment drive in our second year, we co-produced some values-based questions with, obviously, the panel. And then they facilitated independently over 50 interviews of staff, and then made the decisions in terms of who would go through to stage 2 process independently without any, staff input. And also that was over lockdown. So that was facilitated via Zoom, over 50 interviews. It's no easy feat. As I mentioned, we also carried out some commissioning. So as part of our commissioning process, we involved the co-production panel in the moderation of the tenders that we received from different delivery organisations. And they solely marked the questions that are around involving people with lived experience. We also use legislative theatre in the region. Now this is based, it's from New York, based on the Theatre of the Oppressed. And basically it's where people use their life experiences and play those out in front of kind of policy makers and decision makers to try and influence system change. So that's been really powerful. We've also had people with lived experience involved in developing and delivering to staff training around asset-based approaches and also trauma-informed care, which the frontline staff have fed back how impactful that is. If I go to the next slide, please. So, skipped a slide. So can I go back? There should be another slide after this one.
Okay, I think that's this last slide on the deck, Emily.
Well, I'll speak to it then. That obviously, again, moving forward, we're looking to create an involvement framework that recognises, obviously, where people are at in their individual journeys. They provide, really kind of informal activity up to really structured activity, so that obviously people can be as involved or as not involved as they want. And as part of that, we recently just completed our first collaborated training programme, where people on the programme have gone through training to be able to develop and then facilitate their kind of own local activities and try and encourage more people on the programme to get involved, obviously, in the community. So that's proved really exciting, and we're about to develop 4 kind of different activities that people on the programme want to obviously facilitate. And for us, as part of that involvement framework, we're going to be looking to devolve local peer budgets to each local authority, where they can create with the people in that place the type of activities that people want. And that's to try and create these kind of recovery communities whereby people can, make friends, get that kind of mutual aid that will then outlast any kind of programme, and as part of that legacy work for the Housing First in our region. There's a really nice diagram in terms of the constellation of participation, we've called it, that should be on this slide. So I'm not sure where that's gone, but I'm sure you'll be able to see it when the slides are shared. And so at this point, I was just going to invite Lisa to share a bit about her story about being obviously on the Housing First programme. Over to you, Lisa. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm on the Housing First. I've been homeless 3 times. And obviously I've been in services and systems before that have let me down. And I fell through the cracks, gone back down a slippery slope. And I was homeless this time. I went to rough sleepers. I'm in a lot more bad health than last time. And mental health was at low, where I wasn't getting my medication because I had fears of wanting to commit suicide. And then I was put in a bed, and they put me a Housing First worker, and then they introduced me to a support worker called Cheryl. And she believed in me, believed in myself, helped me to get me self-esteem back, helped me to get back into my permanent doctors, helped me to get back on my medication. And she's helped me to, because I don't know how we got on the subject, but I told her that I got A in drama, and I've done poetry. I wrote a poem to all the staff there and to Cheryl, just a big thank you. And then she just asked me if I wanted to go on the co-production. I was a bit sceptical at first, but she's rehoused me in a good place. It's a lovely area. So she's got me on this co-production panel, and it's the best thing I ever done, because I feel like I'm worth something now. And I think I feel like this system's work, because it's put me back into the society. It's helped me to socialise again. It's helped me to believe in myself, helped me to get my self-esteem back. And obviously I write poems now for the co-production. I wrote one and I went to Westminster with it, and everybody loved it. And it is really quite powerful. And it has been powerful in enabling to be able to put my experiences forward, to be able to help other people. Out of all the systems and services, this is the only one that's worked for me, and they're still continuing to help me. Now, I've got my confidence back, but I'm only just above halfway there. And I did want to write my own book, because I've like I said, I've had a lot of experience. I've had happy experiences as well. And Cheryl said to me, you could do whatever you want. So I've done like photography, and I've done like poetry. And this is like part of what I'm doing now, what they've helped me to do, to be able to get my goal to what I want to do. And I know now that I can do what I want to do, and I'm going up, and I'm at that level now where I know with this support and this Housing First is the only one I'm not going to fall through them cracks again and go back down that slippery slope. And I've got positive feelings that I am going to stay in a good place where I am now. And that's how they've helped me.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Lisa. That's great to hear how Housing First has supported you and helped you. I'm really interested because both of you, in a sense, are talking about relationships. In that, Emily, you talked about setting up your partnerships with like 12 different organisations, and I wanted to sort of ask about a lead-in time for that. So, were those partnerships already there, or how much work was put into kind of creating those partnerships? Just something about that, and then I'll kind of talk about relationships in terms of client and worker.
No, yeah, absolutely. Like what we've always said, always all the way along the national evaluation is it's not really housing first, it's relationship first, and that's what it should be looked at and talked about, because obviously that relationship between the person and their worker is so important. Without that, obviously housing first doesn't work either, so it's equally as important as that kind of housing supply as well. And absolutely then having if you've got obviously many partners working together, we all have to have those shared same values and understanding and will and want obviously to do it. So as I mentioned, the Greater Manchester Housing Provider Partnership is already quite established partnership. So a number of the organisations in the Greater Manchester Housing First Partnership were already kind of working together, already had those kind of relationships based on other programmes or obviously other locality work. But then there were new partners that we obviously did bring in obviously the second year, and actually we did that as well via kind of a more of a values-based commissioning exercise to obviously find out more like-minded partners, but also the delivery partners in most of those delivery zones that I talked about were already working with these organisations as well. So for example, in like Manchester, where our lead organisation is Riverside, they do a lot of work already with MASH, who were then the specialist organisation we brought in to support women who street work. But all relationships take time. Obviously it takes forever in terms of like building these relationships, and it's an ongoing process. But I do, think in terms of our relationship with the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, our relationship as a lead provider with the delivery partners is not like that kind of commissioner partner old kind of like school where you would think about it. It's much more kind of we're all working together for the same reason. It's a much more like test and learn and looking at things collectively and how things can be improved and changed, rather than a an old school kind of framework where you're being hung up for things.
Sure. Okay, that's really helpful. And Lisa, I just wanted to ask you one question, because you said that you'd been homeless before and things hadn't sort of worked for you. And then you sort of talked about your support worker, Cheryl. And I just wanted to ask you one question, which it could be quite a long answer, but if you can, just think about what was it about the interaction that you had with Cheryl that made you sort of think, I can trust this person and I can work with this person? Was there anything that was different about her approach?
Oh, yeah, definitely. She come in because I've never had the help of my family. I can't talk to my family. And she helped me straight away, really, within the first couple of meetings. I felt comfortable talking to her. The first thing she did, what I've never had before, she listened.
Right. Okay. So listening's really important.
She listened. Yeah, she listened. Yeah. She didn't ignore me. Now, I've been in services before, and I felt like I'm talking to him, and I might as well been talking to the wall behind him.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I thought he said to me like, "Do it this way, do it that way," and I'm thinking that won't work for me. You don't even know me. You know what I mean? Whereas this time, Cheryl asked me what I liked doing, what I enjoyed doing, what she put me in control. And I'm thinking like she's wanting to get to know me and what had worked for me as an individual. And that was what was different. And I could talk to Cheryl. I've got this kind of relationship where I can talk to her about anything.
Right.
And she'll help me with anything. And when I have my wobbles, I can talk to her. And I feel like she's not just a support worker. I feel like she's my best friend.
Right.
You know what I mean? I've got a relationship.
Yes, that relationship is fairly important.
It's an amazing thing that I've never had before.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Thanks.
You know what?
Yeah.
It's worked for me. It's been amazing for me. Otherwise, I don't know where I'd be now without her. Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Thanks, Emily and Lisa. Thanks for giving up your time, Lisa. That's great. One of the other questions I wanted to sort of ask was around the health commissioning, because certainly with the evaluations that we've done, that kind of multi-agency partnership working and actually getting people access to health and particularly mental health services. So again, it's interesting that you went down the route of actually formally commissioning the health trust to do that. And I know that, in the West Midlands, they've commissioned a PI
service, psychologically informed environment support. And in the Liverpool City Region, they've commissioned sort of specialist sort of psychology support as well. So I'm just interested in, you know, the fact that you commissioned that.
Yeah, as I spoke about before, we obviously knew from much experience that the nature of the people that are on the programme and their needs would obviously be dual diagnosis, and those needs would not be met by the current system. I think we all need to remember we're implementing housing first in an imperfect system. So, you know, currently the health system or the mental health services are not set up in a way to be able to meet the needs of people who've experienced multiple and complex trauma due to like how they're delivered, and also, you know, sometimes with community mental health resourcing issues in terms of funding. So, you know, for us, it was about commissioning that service and making sure there is that direct clinical intervention. And it's quite a robust clinical intervention now, because we started off just with the 4 dual diagnosis practitioners. We now have a senior lead who kind of oversees all the homelessness kind of work in GM to, again, without influencing system change and taking it back into the GMMH Trust in terms of the mental health side of things, try and influence better practice. And we also implemented the psychiatry and psychology from obviously emerging need. But, you know, you would want to get to a position, obviously, where you wouldn't need to be commissioning these separate health services, and that's why I think we very much need to be positioning housing first, like a health intervention. But I won't say any more about that until I'm sure it'll come up at the end in the lessons. But it has been an integral part of the model because, like I say, the system isn't there yet, and the outcomes and support, not only for staff capacity in terms of their support, having a dual diagnosis practitioner as part of their team, being able to talk about cases, being able to take them out to see their workers has been invaluable, and especially now with psychiatry, because they also go out pavement pounding, do assessments where people are, which you know, if you know much about psychiatrists, that doesn't normally happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks for that. We're going to go to a break, but I just wanted to flag up, there's a couple of questions. Somebody's asking a question around value-based recruitment, and if you could sort of answer that in the chat maybe. And then somebody else asked, and I think we'll pick this up when we do the Q&A, which was, has it been easy or challenging to source pipeline properties for the programmes, and are these located in city or town centres and therefore accessible to services and facilities rather than residential areas? And again, I think that's for everyone, and we can pick that up when we come back to the Q&A, but I thought I'd flag those up now. Okay, it's 11 o'clock and we're due a 5-minute comfort break. We'll also, during this time, be showing the Liverpool City Region support workers video. And as I said earlier, if you don't have time to watch it now, all the video clips will be available afterwards. So I'll see everybody in 5 minutes, 11:05. Thanks very much. Thank you.
With Housing First, you're meeting people from day one. It's much more innovative, and it focuses more on the people, smaller caseloads. You can build that relationship over time properly. You're spending time with them in different environments. It's not limited to like one place, and then you don't see them for another week. You're in contact through phone, in person, in multiple settings. So I think that's like giving this a major advantage over the services and the way we're going forward with it.
Working with them to create something, I think is better than saying this is how we do things and you've got to fit into it. So given that flexibility, it's so important to find out what at root what do they want.
It steps back from the conditional model of working with people. Now it's more, you know, they're at the centre of it, empowers them to make the choices. We're there to ask them, how do you want to do things, so we can cater for you and provide like the support based on your needs rather than what we expect of them. I think the principles are great because they advocate for like a new modern way of thinking. stepping away from the staircase model, which kind of like, again, it was expectations. People felt like they had to achieve multiple things in order to get to a place. That's completely different. Support and housing are independent of one another. So regardless of the outcome of a tenancy, the support's still there. For us, we see housing as a basic right, and often you're dealing with people who've been in entrenched homes, rough sleeping, and it can be quite overwhelming for them. So really, it's sort of the work starts there, and you help build their confidence and help them manage the tenancy more effectively. And I think, yeah, so you get them in a home, and that's sort of where their journey really starts. And that's the sort of the bit I like, and that's what sort of excites me. And I think that's where the difference and the change is made. We don't just disappear once there's a roof over their head. We work with them to sort of re-engage them into the community, and I think that's the approach that is lacking, but that's definitely what Housing First brings, and it's definitely what's needed. I think it's more a case of slowly and authentically building trust with them over time, using like a different approach to get to know people, not just trying to force ourselves on them, but getting to know them throughout the initial referral period, then kind of assessing them, then spending time with them in different settings, getting to know them again over a range of different situations, and kind of being with them throughout everything, and just offering more authentic support, more wraparound intensive support, which kind of maybe other services haven't been able to provide. When that we're there, sort of come what may, and as long as they're happy for us to be there, we will be. So that helps build trust slowly, and I think it create a safer environment, because you're dealing with people who have quite specific issues, and if they're open and can trust the person with them, they don't shy away from you, and you work together to make the environment safe for them and figure out ways to make things better for them. I feel like happy, proud, optimistic for them, and I think what makes those feelings more enhanced is that you've been with them from day one. You've got to know that person from the initial referral process right through to going out to visit them in the setting that they were in then. So it could have been a hostel, it could have been that they were sleeping rough, and then spending time with them throughout that journey, going through multiple situations. It could be around their health, it could be around finances, helping them grow, helping empower them to make choices that are going to be beneficial to them. And when the day comes where they're able to get into the situation where they've got the tenancy, it feels great, because you know that you can see how much it means to them. Prior to that, some people haven't felt like they may be worthy of being in a house, and to see them in that place and that they've got that right as well as anybody else, it's a brilliant feeling. It really does centre the service user, and it allows us to be more reactive to things, and hopefully build a long-term better picture for them. And I feel privileged to be part of the journey, as I say, from day one right up to that point, and then obviously ongoing then to see them succeed in that tenancy. It's an extension of their personality, so you get requests of, it could be anything from decorating to the way, to the items they want in the flat, could be what they want to, even having that flat, because then they've now got a static address, they can focus on more stuff. It gives them that kind of confidence to pursue other interests. It could be voluntary work, it could be going out and trying to get more into the paid sector again. Some people, it's that platform. So, but yeah, it could be, there's a range of things. People have gone into homes, and it's just, you can see how much it's like boosted the happiness and the well-being just by being in there. They feel more safe, sheltered. Brilliant.
Okay, it's just gone 11:05, so welcome everybody. If you had a chance to look at that video, I think it raised some really interesting points, and great to see the workers' perspective, because I think a lot of Housing First work has focused on the user experience and getting people's kind of testimony, if you like, about Housing First, but to actually hear the impact that has on workers and the way that they're working and the low caseloads and the ability to build that relationships. Again, we come back to that word relationships. I think is really important. So if you haven't watched it, I recommend you do watch it. And thanks for sharing it with us, sort of colleagues in the Liverpool City region. So I'm now going to hand over to Amanda Bloxsome and Victoria Kell from the Liverpool City region, and they're going to take us through their presentation. So and after that we've got a final video, but before we do the final video, I'll hand you over to Amanda and Victoria. Thanks both.
Hello, I'm Amanda Bloxsome. I just introduced ourselves. So I'm Amanda Bloxsome, I'm Best Practice and Partnerships Lead from Liverpool City Region. And I'm going to also introduce Victoria, who'll be speaking later. Victoria is a Strategic Homelessness Lead for Liverpool City Region. We're going to talk to you today about our pilot in the Liverpool City Region, which is one of the large national pilots funded by DLUC. 3 areas that we're going to talk to you about. We're going to talk to you about the model. As Liz said earlier, the models are all different from the 3 national pilots. We're also going to talk to you about our approach. And we're also going to talk to you about value for money. Okay, next slide, please, Liz. So first of all, I'd like to talk to you about the model. So as was mentioned earlier, Liverpool City Region was really fortunate to have had a feasibility study completed by Crisis in 2017. And that almost gave us our roadmap. We started to deliver in 2018 and 2019. And again, the Housing First approach was included in our Mayor's Manifesto. And Steve Rotherham quite often says it was one of the first things to land on his desk when he moved into the CA. So he's very committed to Housing First. And how we deliver Housing First in the combined authorities, that we've got a centralised approach. So the team are employed by Liverpool City Region Combined Authority from a centralised, really. That gives us the same approach across each local authority, but it also gives us some economies of scale, which we'll talk about a bit more later. Our role from the combined authority, although we haven't got statutory duty, we are aiming to coordinate a standardised approach for the local authorities and supporting and empowering our local authorities with the aim of developing delivery and systemic change. Our team is overseen by a strategic team, and again, this comes under economies of scale and gives the local authorities an additional resource to help develop and deliver Housing First and housing-led services. We oversee governance, commissioning, procurement, best practice, quality, and high fidelity, lived experience and housing supply. With these functions being delivered centrally by the combined authorities strategic team, it allows our operational team to focus on operational delivery. In the initial stages, we developed a small test and learn project, which was a project that was run centrally, and it was only for 60 service users. We used this period of time to learn what was needed to scale up. We worked with 60 service users and it was based centrally. What we learned at scale up is, first of all, we needed to be locality based. We needed to be place based to be able to offer the most effective service in each local area. We also needed housing supply. I think this is a theme that's coming through all 3 pilots. But we also learned in the first test and learn phase, somebody at the door, I do apologise, the dog's barking. We also learned in this first test and learn phase that we couldn't do this alone. And we needed partners on board, stakeholders, to be able to support us to lead Housing First, to develop Housing First and lead systemic change. So from that, we then built up a locality model, which we've got now. Each area has got a centralised hub and the specialisms in each area, and it works differently depending on the place-based resources and what happens in each area. Central functions oversee, just 1 second, so sorry. Central functions oversee quality. We also develop communities of practice, and we have internal and external workforce development offers. The service works on a high fidelity, but with low caseloads. In the locality model, there's a joint responsibility, and we've also developed a multi-agency approach, which I'd like to talk to you a little bit more now. Next slide, please. Okay, so the multi-agency approach that we developed on the second phase of our scale up, which moved us to working with over 200 service users. We developed Housing First panels. In these panels, they were led mostly by local authorities, but the people that sat on the panels were the decision makers of services. So they were the people that could offer alternative services should Housing First or housing-led services not be the best approach for service users. What it gave us in this multi-agency approach was joint responsibility and joint accountability for the first time ever for service users who'd previously fallen through gaps in systems in homelessness. We also were able to offer a whole team approach around a person. So referrals, housing, transfers and closures. There was a solution focus in these multi-agencies. And the people who would be sat around the table would be Housing First, but they would also be led by the local authority. There would be housing providers, police, other stakeholders, adult social care, children's services. And all these people work together to find a solution for people who previously had not had a solution to their particular range of issues. We started to see, with this approach, we've started to see systemic change across the homelessness system. We've started to see local authorities being able to give choice for people around which maybe temporary accommodation solutions, which hasn't been heard of before in our area. We're also able to see that the stakeholders in the area are beginning to look at the strength-based approach, as this is led by Housing First, and they're trying to implement that in services as well. One good example is the local police prevention team have been working with us on strength-based approaches. We're also seeing systemic change around people who were previously not eligible for statutory duty and maybe still not eligible for statutory duty being given services with wraparound support and Housing First included. And we're also seeing in one local authority a real commitment to no rough sleeping and to use the approach to change that and to influence system change. We do think that the Housing First approach with all the stakeholders in the room has given us the ability to be able to look at Housing First and housing-led approaches. So just remember, Housing First is not just a project, it's a cultural approach across the homelessness system, bringing in other services such as health, statutory services and other service providers. We do still have some challenges ahead. Some of the challenges are that we've needed support from adult social care, develop partnerships and working systems with pathways into mental health. As the other Housing First services have mentioned, we've also have commissioned a psychologist service, and we also had to later on commission a service that was specific for acquired brain injury. But pathways into mental health systems do still need some work and some development, and that's something we're looking to develop. We're continuing to look to develop in the future. Okay, sorry, I got my words mixed up there, and I'm sorry about the dog barking. I'm just going to hand you over to Victoria and mute myself. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Amanda. So for the number crunchers of you who've attended today, and for those of you who are commissioners and probably need to explain to councillors and others as to where you need to spend your money and how you provide that value for money through commission services, we're hopefully going to give you a flavour of that and the impact of Housing First to justify some of that today. So firstly, that the Combined Authority, as Amanda's touched on, has brought those economies of scale because we have got that sub-regional resource allocation, which brings things over the top, such as Amanda's role as best practice, our lived experience lead, that strategic lettings function so that we can work with housing providers, link back into the planning process. And that gives it that oversight and governance at a sub-regional level. But in terms of the value of Housing First, Campbell Tickell did the value for money exercise for us and did look at, you know, it was early on in the process. We are 3 years old, which, you know, in some regards does feel quite old, but in other regards for Housing First service users, because of that level of historic background of entrenched behaviours, patterns of homelessness, it will take a long time to make change and to see that change come through. But what they did see was a real comparison against other service, another group, a comparator group, who were not at the time, not when Housing First wasn't there, not able to access Housing First, but they did have the same level of complex needs. And this is because across the Liverpool City Region, we have a system called Mainstay, which is a referral and accommodation-based support monitoring tool. So we can see people come in and out of that referral system. So we were able to have a really good comparator group, and we were able to ensure that they had the same level of complexity as Housing First service users, and it was all done pre-COVID. So the comparison was done to the group pre-COVID because it was a very atypical time when lots of service users were being brought in to service that might not have otherwise been offered a service. But the result was to show that Housing First is 3.5 times more effective than the alternative, so than that comparator group. And we looked at 72 from the comparator group and 58 on the Housing First group. And the results of that were that 62% of the Housing First group still had a tenancy at the end of 2 years, and that was compared to 17% from the comparator group. Housing First service users also spent 51% of their time in a tenancy compared to 10% of the comparator group. Now, it does mention on this slide that Housing First is more costly than the alternative, and we just wanted to draw your attention to why that is. And as I mentioned at the start, it is because Housing First is quite young, and so at times there was double funding where someone was in a temporary accommodation setting receiving support there and receiving Housing First support whilst they waited for a tenancy. So I think the longer the programme goes on and we reduce some of that double funding and also get people into tenancies quicker, if there was supply, if there was an improved housing supply, then we could reduce that level of spend that goes at the front end for service users. But I think what's important for us to point out from the value for money exercise is that Housing First stops that cyclical nature of homelessness. So it does allow service users to stay in those properties for a lot longer, and hopefully those statistics kind of reflect that for you. But it does stop that cycle of homelessness for this particular group. So if you and your local authority are looking at ending homelessness for this client group, then the housing-led approach of Housing First really should offer you that cost-effective delivery. Can I have the next slide, please? And and then lastly, just on some financial impact. So again, I know people need to provide that evidence. So we've had 20 costed case studies done from our programme, and this is just one example, an anonymised example. So the situation for James was that he had been in custody, a history of offending since the 70s, that long-term, persistent and sometimes violent crime. He had been homeless since 2015, in and out of different accommodation services, periods spent rough sleeping, significant substance misuse and mental health challenges. But where he is now, he is offence-free, he's living in the community in his own tenancy, and he's accessing and engaging and being stable with services. So this journey map, this customer journey map, shows that he was grounded in choice, there was intensity, there was flexibility, all of the things that are inherent to Housing First delivery. But it illustrates in cost terms, the difference of Housing First. So this is just for one individual over 12 months. So the change in economic, and you'll see on the other side, social value. So the cost effectiveness of Housing First comes from those planned interventions, having things done up front, those interventions that are much less costly than crisis interventions. So supporting people to access a GP, to access substance misuse services rather than accessing A&E or ending up with drug-related custodial offences. So the value, as I say, is over 12 months, so that £86,813 due to the reduction in arrests, prison stays, improved engagement with adult social care, probation services, substance misuse, and that's just for one individual. And for those organisations who are starting to take account of social value and where we allocate a social value to outcomes and outputs, we're showing the cost of Housing First for James as well. So including how he feels more control of his life, has a stable tenancy that he can afford, and we have attributed a value of all of those things for James, but also for the community and society. So this just illustrates that impact of Housing First as a cost-effective, solution-oriented approach. It switches off that failure demand where crises in situations, circumstances and behaviours of people represent that tipping point and those reactive fragmented responses. So hopefully we can send you, and you'll see through the slides, but we can send you other evidence of the value for money that anybody commissioning this service would get compared to some other options. And I think that's our last slide.
Hi, I was talking away, but I was on mute. So thank you. Some really interesting stuff there, particularly around the sort of value for money. And I think within particularly the Liverpool City region, that kind of combination of centralised support and then the kind of local delivery and the way of getting the centralised support to sort of focus on things like housing supply, like fidelity, best practice training, and then kind of freeing up the local delivery to sort of focus on building those relationships locally and working with people. So that really interesting stuff there. And I think one of the other really interesting things about the Liverpool City region is that there was a source of data there for us to do that value for money comparison that Victoria talked about. So they had the initial test and learn pilot with 60 people. So they had actually been in the Housing First service for 2 years by the time we were commissioned. And then they also had records because of the homelessness system, data sort of capture system that they've been using for a number of years. We could go back and pick a cohort of people that matched the same profile and look at their trajectory over 2 years from 2017 to 2019, and then do that comparator. So that was really, interesting, and actually we were very lucky that you did have that sort of source data really in that information. Okay, we're at a point now where I wanted to kind of ask each of our presenters to sort of give us 2 or 3 key lessons learned from their pilot. And I'm going to start first of all with Channa, because she was the first presenter from the West Midlands. So if you had to summarise, Channa, what are the sort of top 2 things that you think you and colleagues in the West Midlands have learned being part of the Housing First pilot? What do you think those would be?
Top 2.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I think I got to say something regarding the housing supply. I think we definitely learned it's very challenging when it comes to housing supply. Top 2 things, that's one of the things I think anyone should focus on, is getting that right from the beginning. What would that housing structure look in your area? Is it local housing? Is it private housing? Is it housing association? And having those key conversations with those providers beforehand, and actually mapping how that housing process will go is very challenging, and housing first priorities that the clients get to choose where they want to live, where they want to go. And obviously, yes, it's their choice, but it's just, you got to have a good realistic view of your housing stock. I think one of the key things that we definitely come across and learn, and that would definitely aid in having that really robust support for the individual. Another thing I will say is the complexity of the clients, and it's to understand the various background, and having those, I think communication and partnership work is key, and having a really robust communication plan of what housing first isn't, what is not, and having a clear understanding from all your providers and wraparound support, and having that really understood, and really having those amendments made within other external organizations for your housing first clients is key. So I would say communication and housing supply, if I had to pick two.
Okay, thanks. Emily, what would you say your sort of top 2 or 3 lessons from
It's housing first and a housing crisis, isn't it? So I think we can all talk to that. So I won't go on about housing supply and challenges around that. But I think, what we've really learned is so important and does require a lot of time, is that basic awareness of what housing first is and is not. It's, a very sexy buzz, term at the moment, on the height of everyone's agenda. And I think it's really important that everybody, in terms of all stakeholders, understand the model in terms of that managing expectation piece, but also then to understand that housing first is not a standalone model. It's not, a republic that can sit over there. It needs to be integrated into the system in terms of that multi-agency approach. It's a multi-agency approach. It requires all partners to obviously kind of sign up to that, understand that, and then obviously work in kind of that way. And then I'd also like to say, like I said before, that whole importance of relationship first, and that's at every level. This is like a cultural behavioural shift and change as well. And so not only if you're going to be commissioning and working in partnership relationship organisations, but that relationship's obviously on the ground is fundamental between staff and obviously the people they are supporting. So staff is equally as important as that housing, and the model will fall down and not work without either. And obviously if you're delivering at scale, that can be challenging, especially in this current recruitment climate. It's quite difficult currently to be identifying staff in our region. I don't know if that's being felt elsewhere, and that's equally as important. So you've got to have people with the right values.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Emily. I'm going to ask Amanda and Victoria for their sort of top lessons learned, and then we'll look at some of the questions in the chat.
Okay, I think I was going to go first on this one, and then Victoria add anything in if there's anything she wanted to add. So the same as everybody else, really. We were all having the same issues across the 3 pilot areas, or similar. I think housing supply, again, for us has been one of our major challenges. But also I think what would be really good is to understand what good looks like. So I think, I echo some of the other pilots too, what good looks like in housing first. And if you're going to scale up and deliver housing first, what are your boundaries? And for you, what's non-negotiable? Somebody said to me the other day, okay, do you want to end homelessness, or do you want to really stick rigidly to the rules? And, I don't know. I haven't got the answer, but I think there needs to be what is negotiable and what isn't negotiable. We've really wanted to deliver a high fidelity service, and we have been doing that. But is there some negotiables around ending homelessness? And the other thing I think for us that was really important for us was what we realised that I said earlier, we couldn't do this alone. We needed to have our partners on board and work together to have joint accountability and joint responsibility for people in the homelessness system, because as we all know, that's not just a homelessness issue, it needs a whole system approach. And then the other thing, just lastly, to think about is that housing first, for us, something that we've been thinking about quite recently, it's not just a contracted service. This is a whole system approach. So the housing first and housing led approaches are actual cultural change within our own services, with external and within the homelessness and other systems. And I guess that we're just at the pinnacle of change for this, and hopefully Housing First will be able to move them conversations forward. But again, it's not just a contract, it's to affect cultural and system change on the long term. Just one thing, because I wanted to add this.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Go ahead.
Just really that all three pilots, I mean, we need to remember that it is working, and it's one of the solutions. All three pilots are achieving about 90% sustainability on a regular basis. We all do quarterly monitoring, and we're all achieving about 90% sustainability, which means the people in the services are not coming back around the homelessness system. So surely this approach is something that really does need to be given a great deal of consideration. Victoria, did you want to waffle in on now, answer? Go on.
Only a couple of things really, just about, I mean, we talked about co-production earlier, and I think developing a strategy around what's achievable for people to be involved in, what are the different options and models that are available to people to be involved in as you develop the scheme, and how do you bring that voice through to help you develop and respond to the project, and try and work that out at the start as to what is it that people can get involved in at different stages of their journey through Housing First. Getting involved with the movers and the shakers who are involved in integrated care systems, you know, they are absolutely crucial to making Housing First part of the system and not that standalone programme. As Emily said earlier, it is about the system, and I think if you can find out who are the movers and shakers in integrated care and bring them on board with the journey, it will make the rest of the process a lot smoother. I think one of our key things was also about the client group and the parameters of who we could and who we couldn't support. We didn't really have an eligibility criteria at the start of ours, and I think that's meant we've ended up with service users who are maybe not right for Housing First. It isn't for everybody. I think you have to be honest with yourself about that. Housing First isn't the answer to everybody's issues. So just set yourself some really clear parameters about who you would and who you wouldn't offer the programme to, what's that eligibility criteria. And as Amanda said earlier, you know, we really benefited from a multi-agency panel on looking at those referrals and what are the best routes for people as we've gone through that test and learn pilot. So they would be my 3 top tips. Okay, brilliant.
We did actually prepare a slide to sort of summarise some of that. So if we could show that now. So summary of the lessons learned have been around housing supply. I think there's several issues related to that. So for example, as I said earlier, and Shania also mentioned, it's about actually understanding the profile of your social housing in your area is one thing. And then, as Emily sort of talked about, it's around the partnerships that you've got with your housing providers and how you bring them on board and explain to them, get the pledges at a strategic level from CEOs, but also work with your frontline housing officers on the ground and the people who are dealing with referrals within your housing providers, to get them to sort of also understand what Housing First is about and what support is available. There's also something there about, and I think this has been one of the sort of changes that has come about through Housing First, is enabling people to sort of flex their policies and their procedures around things like evictions or transfers, totally always focused on what's going to be the best solution for that person. So those are a couple of the housing issues. There's also some issues around using private rented sector. In each of the pilots, there is a small percentage of the private rented sector. In areas like London, for example, where the housing pressures are even more acute, there have been some more examples of Housing First that's been developed with the PRS. And there, again, the relationship is important, because it's the relationship that the service builds up with the local private rented sector providers. And I think all of you have said that Housing First, it's a system change. It's not a republic over there, as Emily said. It's not a product. It's not an initiative. It's not a program. It's actually a way of looking at trying to change culture and behaviours within the sort of system, which then begs the sort of question around how do we integrate Housing First within the wider system integration. And I think Victoria at the end there sort of mentioned, you know, the sort of integrated care systems and much more place-based ways and population health ways of looking at health, which are being developed now and could be an opportunity. So if we can take the slides down, we'll move on to some of the questions. We've been answering some of the questions as we've been going along, but the first, I'll just go through the questions that haven't been answered to date. We've got sort of 6 questions. One is somebody's interested in value-based recruitment, and is there more details on that we can share? I don't know.
We've got some examples of interview questions that were developed with lived experience input into those value-based questions for recruitment, so we happily share those. That was more about, yeah, our recruitment to our staff as opposed to value-based questions for commissioned activities.
Yeah, we can share, like I mentioned, we co-produced obviously some value-based recruitment questions based on obviously what people thought were really important in terms of the Housing First workers, and obviously they use those to facilitate the interviews independently, and so then how they were kind of scored and looked at obviously in terms of a RAG rating rather than, I guess, numerical numbers. And then I'm happy to share, I guess, what we were asking in terms of our commissioning of our delivery partners that was kind of more focused again on kind of values.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, if you send that to us, we can share it with people. I've got another question, which is, could the panel talk us through how tenancy breakdown is managed through the lens of PI and TIC? So PI, psychologically informed environments, and TIC, trauma-informed care. And there was another question which was about cuckooing and whether the Housing First services have experienced some of that. So I don't know who wants to come in on tenancy breakdown and or cuckooing.
I can come in on the cuckooing.
Okay.
So we have really seen a lot of these issues across the seven locality that for Birmingham, West Midlands. I think one of the question I did give an answer in the group, but we in Birmingham we're trying to develop a cuckooing training, online training for staff and clients, and it's basically for staff to know exactly what it is and how to support the clients with it. And one of the key things within the training I need to have is healthy relationships, because one of the things we identified is some individuals don't know what a healthy relationship is. And the whole cuckooing is about individual taking, especially individual with dual diagnosis, and providing them with, you know, the something that they need, and then using their house as a base for selling or doing whatever that they're doing from there. Then that individual doesn't have control over their property, and it's, you know, and it's about they're thinking that there's their friend and they're not their friend. They're just using them to access their property. And it's about understanding what's healthy relationship is. So we're doing that with Aquarius, trying to figure out how to do that. But also there's other techniques. So we have an operational group meeting every month with all the 7 locality comments and understand what are her challenges, what are our success, and how we can work together. What have you done and lesson learned? And they have got really good support from the police, especially with dealing with these cocoon individuals, having restrictions with the individual, not allowing the individual to access their home, putting those sanctions or and that's been really supportive. But also I think another key thing that they've used is the modern day slavery law as well, that actually can use that for cocoon support as well. So it's not something foolproof, but there's just accessing external support and help that I'm working along with housing support staff as well to aid the navigators within West Midlands to support them. But a couple of things they can tap into that I've known that we've actually learned from other areas, and we use it to support other ones. That the police are really good help. The housing officers are really good help as well. But again, we're gathering up some knowledge to share.
Sure. Thanks, Shania. I don't know if Amanda or Victoria or Emily want to come in around tenancy breakdown and how you kind of approach that within a kind of trauma-informed way.
Yeah, I can speak to obviously kind of what we do in obviously Greater Manchester. So fundamentally, we had a KPI with our delivery partners around regular contact with housing officers in terms of like on a weekly basis to ensure that's regular communication. So actually, a lot of issues have like, you know, you can pick up early in terms of early intervention and prevention to try and tackle things before obviously they then result in tenancy failure or things getting, I guess, a bit out of control. And then obviously in terms of from a trauma lens, you're looking at that behaviour, someone's behaviour in terms of the root cause for that behaviour. So for example, if there's like ASB going on in the property, what is that about? Is that because actually they're feeling really lonely, which most people do when they're moving from a street life into a property for the first time? And then actually how can we address that need to then prevent the behaviour that's impacting on the tenancy? Obviously all of our staff have reflective case management support from the clinical psychologist as well to obviously pick these types of issues with her clinical support. And then obviously we have regular reviews with the housing officers and also provide kind of best practice and training to them around trauma and trauma approaches. And you know, it's understanding to basic things like, you know, not sending warning letters, but how we can all work together in terms of a trauma way to try and sustain that tenancy. And then if you know, fundamentally tenancies can't be saved for maybe they've been identified as areas where actually people are unsafe in them, aka cuckooing or whatever else, we facilitate and support managed moves where we'll move somebody into another property, obviously in a managed and supported way, to obviously try and prevent if the external factor was the issue for that tenancy failure, then obviously moving them to a different area can often help. But also we do know for housing first, the first house is not necessarily always the last, quite often.
Yeah, I think I would echo that. From the sort of two evaluations we did in the West Midlands and Liverpool City Region, the approach around the processes and working with housing providers around, actually, no, it's not just about following your processes through, it's about really thinking about this individual and what the issues are that are causing the problem with the tenancy, but also working flexibly around managed moves, transfers, because sometimes it can take 1 or 2, 3, possibly even more tenancies before somebody is actually settled. And one of the things that's been said about housing first is its stickability. And that's about the stickability of the system and the workers to actually sort of get the person to a point where they're sort of stable. And that's going to go up and down over time, including stuff around tenancies. So sort of really good sort of way of illustrating how that's worked.
Can I just add there as well to think about the model of housing first. So housing first, how it's set up is that support is supposed to be responsive and reactive. So I guess probably across all of our services, if there is an issue, then the services can put higher levels of support in for that individual to maybe help them, support them through more of a crisis time, really. And that, you know, housing first services caseloads are really small to be able to do that.
Sure. Okay. I've got someone asking if the email addresses of the speakers could be shared. Yeah. Okay. We'll make sure you get those. And then I've got a comment from Eileen McMullen, who's from the Housing Federation in Scotland. Eileen's had to leave, unfortunately, but she's just saying that there's been pilots in Scotland that have been evaluated by Heriot-Watt University, and that Housing First is now being rolled out across the majority of local authority areas in Scotland. And then there was a question from Eileen, which is about how successful have the different organisations been in accessing good quality, affordable private sector accommodation. And we know that there is some use of private rented accommodation, but I'd just be interested in your views as a sort of pilot areas in terms of how the PRS has worked for you. Shall I start with you, Amanda, and then we can go to Shania and then Emily.
Yeah, we originally started only using social housing in the Liverpool City Region pilot, but we have used some private rented sector, although it's been minimal really. Private landlords in that particular area seem reluctant to offer housing first service users, so we've not had much success with that. What we are doing is looking at different models of leasing to be able to increase our housing supply. But again, that's with the social housing sector.
Sure. Okay, and then Shania, do you want to say something about sort of use of private rented sector in the West Midlands pilot?
Yeah, I mean, for Birmingham, because we have 7 local authority, which is different usage of housing supply. But Birmingham didn't use any private sector organized properties. Some local authority has, but it hasn't been really successful in the uptake. In my slide, I do have the percentage of private rented properties that we had across the region. I don't think it's in the double figures of percentages. But we have other local authorities that we use as well. But again, it's a challenge. In Birmingham, we did have our SLA where we had with the housing associations and private sector say what good looks like for you, what we're going to support you, what's not. That aided a lot. But what we found out is that many private sector do have family homes. The stock is really family homes, and from housing first is majority 1-bedroom flats that we're looking for. So there is that to take as well, is to assess, again, I said, assess what your property structure look like in your locality area. Because a lot of these providers, they want to help, but they just don't have the stock available and the areas that required. But it is challenging regardless, but it's good to understand what their challenges are as well.
Okay, Emily, I don't know if you want to say anything about private rented sector.
Yeah, we in our first year of delivery commissioned the Bomb Board, which are a small specialist charity that operate in a couple of the local authorities in Greater Manchester, to open up the PRS sector specifically, because that's what they do in terms of the people who are marginalised onto complex issues. The problem we find in Greater Manchester, which I'm echoing obviously what everyone else has said, is around affordability and availability. So obviously the LHA rate, a lot of properties are unaffordable, and then also where they are affordable properties, they get snapped up extremely quickly. And then also the flexibility in terms of carrying out tenancy sign-ups and checks is not there as with social landlords. So they want, guarantors, or they want ID that obviously people in our programme struggle to provide. Currently, a member of my team dedicates a day a week of her time to do some contacting of landlords, try and generate some interest in buy-in, but it's exceptionally difficult, like I say, because of the market. And then we do have the Ethical Lettings Agency in Greater Manchester, but due to demand and resource, they're kind of focusing on different groups of people that obviously need accommodation, because as we all know, there's lots more people than on our programmes that only need accommodation, and there just simply isn't the properties there. But we are looking to work with the local authority PRS teams more moving forward, and how we can kind of, I guess, increase access. But again, we've not had over 20 properties from the PRS from the start because of the issues I've just described. It's very challenging.
Okay, thanks. And I've got one question. Is the accommodation used within the pilots based on exempt HB or not? And I believe the answer is not, because you're not allowed to sort of use exempt accommodation rules. Yeah. Okay, so hopefully that's answered that question. We've got one more video to sort of show to close things. I need to give a trigger warning because there is discussion or there is a mention of suicide in that video. So if that's going to be difficult for anybody, I forewarn you now to maybe come off the webinar at that point. The only kind of other thing I wanted to sort of really finish up with is in terms of lessons learned by us as evaluators. I think what we found was the Housing First workers, the managers, the combined authority officers, everybody's commitment to Housing First and to making this work. You know, large scale, you're looking to try and find 400 and 500 one-bed units across a region. You're looking to engage with people that have been failed innumerable times and have got virtually no trust in any kind of professional, in inverted commas. And you're also trying to do that during a pandemic and a housing crisis. So being sort of involved in evaluating and seeing some of the results that you've all been able to achieve, I think for the whole of our sort of team has been really humbling, actually, to sort of see that commitment and the work that's gone in a really challenging time. Because when the pilot started, COVID wasn't around. So, and to be able to pivot and to manage it all within all those constraints and to achieve some results, I think have been really good. I think the other thing we've learned is that actually people with long-term needs need to be funded for the long term. And I know that the pilots have been under a bit of pressure around numbers of graduations and how many people can kind of step down and at what point in the process. But I think fundamentally the issue is that some people are going to need long-term ongoing support. That might flex, it may fluctuate, but that is going to be the need. I think we've mentioned again before, relationships absolutely matter, whether they're between workers and the people that they're working with, or whether it's across systems, across council departments, across different statutory agencies. Those relationships and those partnerships are absolutely crucial to creating a workable Housing First system. Adaptation, flexibility, risk sharing by all partners needs to be built in, I think, and you need to work on that basis. So I guess, you know, the leading time and the preparation time and the thinking time into how the pilot would work up front is really important. Also, that kind of central control and resources and the local delivery really works, and it's worked in different ways and using the different structures that the three pilots have had. And I think we've heard many examples of the sort of ripple effect of some of the system changes that Housing First has been able to trigger by the approach, by the way that staff have worked with people, by the creation of the partnerships, or asking people to really sort of step up and make those commitments. So hopefully that's sort of rounded things off. I think the before we move on to the video, just to sort of remember that, you know, all the pilots, as we've said, have achieved 80 plus, 90 plus tenancy sustainability, and that Housing First, you know, the evidence shows it does cost more, but actually achieves twice as much per pound spent in terms of the tenancy outcomes. So I'd leave you with that. And if we can move to the video now. I think, yeah, okay, great.
Life was good at first, and obviously I started taking drugs. I lost my children to my mum, lost my house eventually, ended up homeless. I just hit hard, robbing people, smoking crack, being up for days. I just didn't see no way forward because I'd lost my kids. I weren't allowed to see them.
I became homeless, it must have been about a year and a half ago. I was using drugs heavily, not attending work on time and taking drugs and having mental health issues that I didn't address at the time.
I hadn't dealt with a lot of things to do with abuse that had gone on, and I had issues with addiction that I was using to mask and cope with that. So my life had become chaotic, and I was put in temporary accommodation, and that's where it kind of went wrong for me.
I'm probably unrecognisable now from when I first entered services. And I've managed to gain like genuine excitement for the future.
Well, I got clean, I got rehoused, I've been in work for 12 months now, paid me rent, and now I've been selected to be a co-production panel member. I do a lot of music, a lot of art, just all the things that I wanted to do with my life, like, it's coming together. It's the most incredible thing that's happened to me. Having my own place, having the security, it's made it easier for me to make healthier choices in my life, where I can just be and just find out who I am and heal. And
I have an assigned worker. If I have any problems, I can talk to them. This kind of support works for me because it's more like an emotion thing. It's more like there's someone there to hear you out, or someone there that you feel cares and listens. There was a while I didn't really have that.
If I wouldn't have had housing first, I wouldn't be where I am today. I probably would have killed myself because I wouldn't have got my house. I wouldn't have got a clean. Now I'm allowed to pick my kids up from school. I think it's the most essential and beneficial way forward. There's all these different dynamics of different people, but they need different kinds of care, and that's why Housing First is better, because they can cater for that individual person. Let's change people's lives. Everyone entitled to an house, to support, and it just proves that it does work. It changed my life.
Thanks, everyone. That was really powerful, actually. We've got a feedback form if you would care to complete that, and hopefully see you again soon to discuss other issues as well as Housing First again. Thank you. Bye.